Drove 6 hours to spend Christmas with my husband's family. When I pulled into the driveway, his car wasn't there. No lights inside except for one lamp in the front room. I thought maybe they'd gone to pick up last-minute groceries, or maybe my husband had taken his grandmother somewhere. Then I saw the note taped to the front door, sealed in an envelope with my name written in his handwriting. I stood on the porch in my coat and read it twice. Gone to Whistler with Kayla. Couldn't get out of it. Gran knows you're coming. She'll be fine. Back on the 27th. Sorry. That was it. No phone call, no warning. Just a sticky note and a door I didn't have a key to. I knocked. I heard shuffling from somewhere deep in the house, slow and careful, the sound of someone who doesn't move quickly anymore. The door opened and my husband's grandmother, Elowen, everyone called her Elo, stood in the doorway in a cardigan that was too thin for December. She looked at me, then past me at the empty driveway. "He's not with you," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "He's not." She nodded, like she already knew, like she'd been expecting this exact moment for longer than I had. She stepped back to let me in, and I noticed she was holding the doorknob tightly, using it for balance. "Well," she said. "I suppose it's just us then." The house was cold. Not freezing, but the kind of cold that settles when the heat is turned down for days at a time. I found the thermostat in the hallway set to 16 degrees. I turned it up to 21 and went back to my car to get my bags. My husband had told me his grandmother was doing fine. Fully independent, he'd said, sharp as ever. She just needed some company over the holidays. That's why he'd asked me to drive up separately. He had some work thing he couldn't skip. He'd meet me there. That was the story I'd been given. I'd believed it because I wanted to, because it was easier than asking questions I didn't want answered. I put my bags in the guest room and came back to the kitchen. Al was trying to reach a pot on the top shelf of the cabinet and I crossed the room fast, taking it down for her. She didn't thank me. She just held it in both hands and looked at it like she'd forgotten what she wanted it for. "Have you eaten today?" I asked. She thought about it. Genuinely thought about it. Like the answer wasn't obvious. "Yesterday, I think. There's soup somewhere." I opened the fridge. A container of yogurt 3 weeks past its date, half a block of old cheddar, and some leftover rice in a bowl with no cover. The freezer had 2 frozen dinners, the kind with the thin cardboard trays. One of them had been opened and pushed back in. I stood there with the fridge door open for a moment. My husband had been up here 2 weekends ago. He told me the visit went well, that he'd stocked up her pantry, taken her to her doctor's appointment. He'd even sent me a photo of them at a restaurant, Elle smiling over a plate of pasta. I went to the pantry. There were tins, chickpeas, diced tomatoes, 1 can of soup, and a bag of rice that had been mostly used. Nothing that hadn't been there for a while. No fresh groceries. No sign of a recent shop. I closed the pantry and said, "I'm going to make dinner. Proper dinner. Let me just run to the store." Elle looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You don't have to do that." "I know," I said. "I want to." The nearest grocery store was 20 minutes away. I drove there in the dark, Christmas Eve, and wandered the aisles while my phone sat silent in my pocket. I'd tried calling my husband 3 times since I'd arrived. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. I sent a text that said "call me when you get a chance" and stared at the word delivered for a while before I put the phone away and focused on finding a chicken. When I got back, Elle was in her chair by the window. She had a photo album open on her lap, but she wasn't looking at it. She was looking out at the dark. "My son used to call every Sunday," she said when she heard me come in. Then it became every other week, then it stopped. She turned the page without looking at it. "His son is very similar." I didn't say anything. I put the groceries away and started on dinner. We ate at the kitchen table. She told me about her late husband, a man named Gil who'd worked for BC Rail for 32 years. How they'd met at a dance in Prince George in 1968. How he proposed on the banks of the Fraser River in the rain because he planned a picnic and the weather didn't cooperate and he couldn't wait anymore. She laughed telling it, a real laugh, not the polite kind. "He sounds wonderful," I said. "He was stubborn and difficult, and the best person I ever knew." She picked up her fork. "You remind me of him a little bit." "Me? You drove 6 hours on Christmas Eve to a house that wasn't ready for you, and the first thing you did was check if I'd eaten." She looked at me directly. Gil would have done the same thing. After dinner, I washed the dishes, and Elle sat at the table with her tea. We didn't talk for a while and it wasn't uncomfortable. At some point she said, "Can I show you something?" She led me to a room at the back of the house. It had been a study at some point. There were still bookshelves along one wall, but most of it had been cleared out. A hospital bed had been set up in the corner, still in its plastic wrap, not assembled. "My grandson arranged for that to be delivered," she said. 6 weeks ago, he told me it was for my comfort." She looked at it without touching it. "I'm not bedridden. I have some pain in my hip. I see a physiotherapist. I am not dying." "Why would he?" "Because a hospital bed in a room changes things legally," she said. "It changes the conversation with doctors. It changes what family members can request on your behalf." She turned to look at me. I looked it up. I'm not as unfamiliar with the internet as he thinks. I sat down on the edge of a bookshelf. He's been asking me to sign things," she said. "Documents about the property, about my bank accounts. He says it's just to protect me in case something happens." She paused. "The first time I signed, I didn't read it carefully enough. The second time, I said I needed my solicitor to look at it first. And?" He got very angry. Said I was being paranoid. That he was trying to help me, and I was making him feel like a criminal. She said it flatly, without drama. Just reporting what happened. He didn't come back for 2 months after that. I thought about the photo he'd sent me. Elle smiling over pasta at a restaurant. How easy it had been to believe it meant everything was fine. "What did your solicitor say?" I asked. "I haven't gone yet," she said quietly. I didn't want to cause trouble. I kept thinking, he's my grandson, he wouldn't. She stopped. "But he left me here alone at Christmas with nothing in the fridge and the heat at 16 degrees. So, I slept badly that night. In the morning I made us eggs and toast and real coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table while the sun came up over the snow, and I thought about what I was going to do. My husband still hadn't called back. I'd sent 2 more texts. Nothing. After breakfast Elle said, "I have an appointment with a physiotherapist on the 27th. My grandson was supposed to take me." "I'll take you," I said. "It's in Kamloops. I'll take you." She looked at me over her mug. "You're not what I expected you to be." "What did you expect?" She thought about it. "Someone more convenient." We spent Christmas Day quietly. I found a jigsaw puzzle in the closet. One of those 1,000-piece ones with a painting of a mountain lake, and we spread it out on the dining table and worked on it for most of the afternoon. Elle was methodical about it. She sorted by color first, then by edge pieces, then she mapped out a section and worked it slowly from the corner. I tend to just grab pieces and try things. We were completely different in our approach, and somehow it worked. She told me about her property, a house here, where she'd lived for 30 years, and a piece of land in the Okanagan, about 40 hectares that she and Gil had bought in the 1980s for almost nothing, land that had since become extremely valuable as vineyards expanded through the valley. She'd been approached 3 times by developers, she said. She'd turned them all down. That land was going to a land trust when she died. She decided that years ago. Does my husband know about that? She set down the puzzle piece she was holding. He knows about the land. He doesn't know what I've decided to do with it. A pause. He has certain expectations about what he's inheriting. I thought about the documents he'd asked her to sign. About the hospital bed still in its plastic. "Elle," I said, "you mentioned you haven't seen your solicitor yet. I've been putting it off. She's in Kamloops too. I didn't have a way to get there." I picked up my phone. "What's her name?" Her solicitor was a woman named Gwen, sharp and unhurried in a way that good lawyers often are. I called from Elle's kitchen while Elle sat at the table and listened. Gwen remembered Elle immediately, asked how she was, and when I explained briefly that Elle needed to come in before the new year, Gwen said she had a slot on the 27th, same day as the physio appointment. "Is this about the documents her grandson has been sending over?" Gwen asked. I went still. "He's been sending them to you?" "Twice in the past 4 months. Both times I advised against signing. Both times he stopped returning my calls." A pause. "I'm very glad she's coming in." After I hung up, Elle was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He's been sending them to her too." "Yes?" She looked down at the half-finished puzzle. "He's been thorough." "He has." She picked up a piece and turned it in her fingers. "Will you come with me? To Gwen's office?" "Of course." On the 26th, my husband finally called. I was in the kitchen making soup and I almost didn't pick up. I did though, old habit. He sounded relaxed. Slightly sunburned, I could somehow tell. He asked how things were going, said he hoped Al and I were getting along. That he'd be back the following day and we'd do a belated Christmas dinner. It would be fine. The heat was at 16 degrees when I arrived, I said. A pause. The heat? The thermostat. 16 degrees. There was almost no food in the house. Elle hadn't eaten properly the day before I arrived. She forgets to eat sometimes, that's just. She doesn't forget, I said. She didn't have anything to eat. Another pause, longer this time. Look, I know it's not ideal, but I needed a break too, you know? It's a lot, managing her needs from the city, the drives up, all of it. You told me you were here 2 weekends ago. I was. She said you haven't been up since October. Silence. We'll talk about it when I get back, he said, and his voice had shifted, tighter, the warmth pulled back in. Don't make this into something it isn't. I'm not making it into anything, I said. I'm just telling you what I found. He said he had to go. He'd see me tomorrow. He hung up. I stood in the kitchen for a while with the phone in my hand. We had been married for 3 years. I had given up a job I loved in Toronto to move to Vancouver so he could be closer to his family. I had spent weekends driving up here, cooking meals, keeping Elle company, because he'd said it was important, because I'd believed that was who we were. People who showed up. I went to the dining room. Elle was at the puzzle again, the lamp on beside her against the gray afternoon light. He called, I said. I could hear, she said. She fit a piece into the lake and smoothed it down with one finger. He's charming when he wants to be, he always has been. She didn't look up. His grandfather wasn't charming at all, just honest. I used to think that was a flaw. I sat down across from her and started looking for sky pieces. He took $8,000 from a joint account we had, I said. I hadn't told anyone that yet. 3 weeks ago, for what he called a renovation fund. I found out when I was balancing my account statement. He said it was going into the house. I picked up a piece and turned it over. There is no renovation. Elle set down what she was holding and looked at me. There's a pattern, she said quietly, with the men in this family. Or maybe it's just the two of them, my son and now his son. She folded her hands on the table. They're very good at making you feel like you're the unreasonable one. Yes, I said. We sat with that for a while. The 27th was clear and cold, the highway dry, the mountains pulling light out of the pale December sky. I drove. Elle sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap, and we listened to the radio the way people do when they don't need to fill the silence. The physio appointment went well. Al's hip was improving, the physiotherapist said. She'd been doing her exercises. She was making real progress. Al looked quietly pleased in the way she always did when someone told her she was doing better than expected. Gwen's office was 3 blocks from the clinic. We walked slowly because of Al's hip. Gwen was in her late 50s. Silver hair cut short, the kind of person who shakes your hand and makes you feel like your time is worth something. She'd set aside 2 hours. I waited in the reception area while they talked. I answered emails I'd been ignoring. I got a coffee from a machine down the hall and stared out the window at the street. My husband had sent a text saying he was on his way back, asking what I wanted for dinner. I didn't reply. When Elle came out, she looked calm and a little tired, and something else settled, maybe. Like something she'd been carrying had been put down somewhere it was supposed to go. She found irregularities, Elle said, when we were back in the car, in the account statements. Transfers that I didn't authorize. She buckled her seatbelt. She's contacting the bank directly and filing a report with the provincial authorities. I kept my hands on the wheel. She also updated my will, Elle said, and created a power of attorney that names my neighbor, Phyllis, as my representative. Phyllis and I have been friends for 30 years. She looked out the window. She also contacted the land trust in the Okanagan directly. They're sending someone in January to complete the documentation. Good, I said. Gwen asked if I wanted to include a provision. Elle paused. About you. About the house. I looked at her. I said yes. She said it simply, looking forward. You drove 6 hours on Christmas Eve and turned the heat up and bought me a chicken. You don't have any obligation to me. A pause. Nobody who doesn't have to be here has ever been here. Not once. I didn't know what to say. I looked back at the road. You don't have to say anything, she said. I didn't tell you to make you say something. We drove home mostly in silence, the good kind. My husband arrived while I was helping Eel with the puzzle. I heard his car, heard the front door, heard his footsteps in the hall. He appeared in the dining room doorway looking tanned and slightly uncertain. "Hey," he said, looking between us. "What's all this?" "Puzzle," Al said. "Puzzle?" Al said. He kissed me on the cheek. I didn't move toward him or away. He looked at the table, at the soup bowls from dinner, at the lamp and the scattered pieces. "You look cozy," he said. The word had a careful neutrality to it. "We've had a good couple of days," Al said. "Your wife has been very helpful." She fit a piece into the puzzle and examined the result. "She took me to my appointments in Kamloops today." Something shifted in his face. "You had appointments?" "Physio?" Elle said, "and Gwen." A pause. "Your solicitor." Elle found another piece and didn't look up. He turned to me. "Can I talk to you for a second?" We went to the kitchen. He closed the door, which struck me as odd. Elle was 79 and her hearing was fine, but closing the kitchen door was not going to change anything about this conversation. "What did you say to her?" His voice was controlled, the charm stripped out of it. "About what?" "About the documents. About any of it. You had no business." "She asked me to take her," I said. "I took her." "You went behind my back." "You weren't here," I said. "You left her alone at Christmas with no food and the heat off. You've been asking her to sign things her own solicitor told her not to sign. You've been taking money from her accounts." I said it evenly, not angry, just clear. I didn't go behind anything. I just paid attention. He stared at me. "The bank statements," I said. "And the $8,000. And the renovation that doesn't exist." His jaw tightened. "I'd like to leave tomorrow morning," I said. "I'll drive Elle to her neighbor Phyllis's first and make sure she's settled. And then I'm going home." "Jade." He stopped, corrected himself. He'd called me by someone else's name. He did that when he was rattled. I'd noticed it before and explained it away. I stopped explaining it now. "I just think we need to sit down and talk this through like adults." "I think we need some time apart," I said. "I think I've been very patient, and I think some time apart would be good." He looked at me for a long moment, something working behind his eyes. Calculation, I realized, not emotion. He was figuring out what the best move was. I'd spent 3 years thinking that pause meant he was feeling something. He was just calculating. "Fine," he said. "We can do that." I went back to the dining room. Elle looked up when I came in. I sat down and picked up a puzzle piece and we worked in silence for a while. "Everything all right?" she asked after a bit. "Yes," I said. And it was true, actually. Unexpectedly true. "I think so." We finished the puzzle that night. The full picture was a lake somewhere in the Kootenays. Still water, the mountains reflected in it perfectly. One small dock in the lower right corner. Al sat back and looked at it. "Gil and I went there once," she said. "The summer we got engaged. We couldn't afford a proper trip, so we drove out with a tent and stayed 4 days. It rained the whole time." She smiled. "It was perfect." I drove her to Phyllis's in the morning. Phyllis was a large, warm woman in her early 80s, who opened the door and hugged Elle and said, "I've been expecting you, come in, come in." And looked at me and said, "You must be the one who actually showed up." I don't know what I said back. Something, I think. Elle squeezed my arm at the door and didn't say anything, and she didn't need to. I drove back to Vancouver alone. 6 hours, mostly highway, the mountains slowly becoming foothills, becoming the flat gray outskirts of the city. I thought about the $8,000 and what I was going to do about it. I thought about the apartment we shared, and the boxes I would have to pack, and how many of the things in it were actually mine. I thought about Elle at Phyllis's kitchen table. Probably drinking tea. Probably talking about Gil. I thought about what it means to be somewhere because you chose to be, not because you calculated that it was worth your time. I had spent 3 years trying to be convenient, easy to manage, low maintenance. I had folded myself smaller and smaller because it seemed to keep the peace, and the peace had always seemed worth preserving. I understand now that I was the only one preserving it. I'm not angry at myself for that. I was doing the best I could with what I understood at the time. But I'm done. Gwen called me in January to let me know the process was moving forward. The bank had confirmed unauthorized transfers and the relevant authorities had been notified. The land trust documentation was complete. Elle had moved in with Phyllis temporarily while the situation was being reviewed and was, by all accounts, doing well. She wanted me to tell you something, Gwen said. What's that? She said you reminded her of her husband. She said he was stubborn and difficult, and the best person she ever knew. A pause. She seemed to think you'd know what that meant. I did. I pulled my car over on a side street in East Van and sat there for a minute with the engine running and the heater going and the city gray and wet outside the window. Then I put it in drive and kept going. I've been thinking about the thermostat a lot since then. 16 degrees. It's such a specific, ordinary detail, not dramatic, not cinematic, just a number on a dial that told me everything I hadn't wanted to know. The truth is, I had known for a while. Not the specifics, not the $8,000, not the documents he'd been sending to Gwen, not the fact that he hadn't actually been up to see Elle since October. But the shape of it. The way a conversation would shift when I asked too many questions. The way I had learned, gradually and without quite noticing, to ask fewer. I had been editing myself for 3 years, trimming down my instincts, explaining away the small things because individually, they were easy to explain. And collectively, they were not something I was ready to look at. What Elle gave me, and I don't think she planned it this way, I think she was just being honest because she didn't have the energy left for anything else, was the chance to stop explaining, to just look. She'd spent years watching a pattern repeat. Her son, then her grandson. The charm, the financial maneuvering, the slow erosion of someone else's certainty until they started to doubt their own memory of events. She recognized it faster than I did because she'd lived it longer. And she told me, not with anger, but with that particular clarity that comes from having nothing left to protect. I think about what it took for her to open that door, to see the empty driveway and know and still let me in. She could have sent me away. She could have said everything was fine, the way people do when they've been told so many times that their version of events is wrong that they stop offering it. Instead, she made room. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Not the legal outcome, not the will, not the account irregularities and the authorities and all the mechanisms that eventually corrected what had been done. Those matter. They absolutely matter. But what I find myself thinking about at 6 a.m, driving through the city before traffic, is Elle at her kitchen table sorting puzzle pieces by color. Methodical. Patient. Trusting a process even when the picture wasn't clear yet. I spent a long time believing that keeping peace was the same thing as being good. That absorbing the friction, adjusting to fit, staying quiet when something felt wrong, that this was generosity. It isn't. It's just fear with better manners. Real generosity is what Elle did when she said yes to Gwen's appointment, when she let me take her there, when she let someone finally help, because she decided her own dignity was worth the disruption. I can't undo the 3 years. I don't think I need to. They taught me how to recognize the pattern, in a thermostat set too low, in a fridge with almost nothing in it, in a pause that lasts a beat too long before someone answers. I know what those things mean now. I won't need to learn it twice. Gwen called in January. Elle was well. The land trust documentation was complete, and Elle had asked her to pass along that message. The one about Gil, about stubborn and difficult and the best person she ever knew. I pulled over on a side street and sat with it for a minute. Then I put the car in drive. That's all you can do, really. You stop, you feel it, and then you keep going.